Hi everybody. Hope everybody is doing okay. I thought today I would want to give you a little bit more background, go back to chapter 19 to section 2, because it's going to contrast with some of the things we've been talking about, both in terms of GDP, gross domestic product, as well as price indexes, something we've covered lately. Kind of an important difference and distinction I'm going to reveal to you today. So what we're going to talk about today is nominal and real GDP, what those two things mean. Now, suppose a nation only produces pizza and cola. Not the healthiest of nations, kind of like the United States, I guess. But anyway, for 2019, maybe the nation produces 10 pizzas, and the price for each pizza is 12, 50 colas, and the price of each cola is $1. Now, GDP is just the dollar value of all goods, in this case there's no services, but goods and services produced in a year. So, if we have 10 pizzas that cost $12, and we have 50 colas that cost $1, that's $120 of pizza, $50 of cola. Our nation has produced $170 of goods. Our GDP in 2019 is $170. Now, suppose in 2020, the next year, the nation produces 12 pizzas and the price rises from $12 to $15. The quantity of cola goes from 50 to 60, but the price of cola, will keep the math simple, stays at $1. So now, the dollar value of all goods and services produced in 2020, we have 12 pizzas at $15, 60 colas at $1, that's 180 plus 60, and GDP has gone up to 240. It went from 170 in 2019 to $240 in 2020. All right, the value of GDP has gone up. But wait a second. GDP has gone up for two reasons. One of them is our nation produced more. That's good. GDP is a measure, and as you saw in some of the videos, it really does relate to happiness and what people can afford. So the result is we've produced more, and that's good. But on the other hand, prices rose. Prices rose for pizza. And I imagine as you're buying pizza, you don't really like to hear that the price has gone up. So what we find out is even though GDP went up, one of the reasons it went up we think is good. The nation's produced more, but the other one is really not so good. GDP has gone up because prices have gone up. What we see here is there are two flavors of GDP. Nominal GDP, that's what we've just calculated here. That's GDP in each year's prices. So in other words, in 2019, using 2019 prices, what we found out that GDP was $170. And in 2020, the second calculation we did, we found out GDP was 240. Just what we've done so far. That's nominal GDP. We look at the GDP in that year's prices. But real GDP, that's what economists like to look at. We choose a base year, just like we did for a price index. We're going to use some year for comparison. So let's say we take 2019 as our base year. What we are going to do then is we are going to ask the question, if prices had not changed, what would happen to the dollar value of what we produced? In other words, for real GDP, we use base year prices for both years. So if prices hadn't changed, if they stayed at $12 and $1, our new quantity of pizza, we value it at the base year price. Our new quantity of water, we value that at the old and still $1 price. So now we see that our GDP is $204. GDP has not increased, real GDP has not increased as much. Okay, so if we look at this, real GDP, which nets out those price increases, what we see is real GDP has only gone up by $34. Nominal GDP, if we don't take out those price increases, if we allow prices to go up, GDP went up by $70. $34, $70. In other words, half of the gain in GDP, 34 of our 70, was due to real growth, and half was just due to rising prices. So real GDP shows us the growth in production net of price changes. That's what we really want. What really happened in the economy? Well, this is actual real GDP for the United States since the year 2000. The base year is 2012. So what you can see here is this is what's happened to real GDP over the last 20 years. These gray areas show recessions. And as you can see, there was a dip in real GDP around 2001. Consumers were kind of worried starting early in 2001, and right about the time you folks were being born, 9/11 occurred. Consumers were very worried. And when people are worried, kind of like today, they cut back on their spending. Businesses cut back on their investing, and GDP declined. The big decline was the Great Recession, what we had in 2008 and 2009. And we see that real GDP really wound up declining. Since then, however, it has been increasing. Technically, a committee of economists calls when a recession started and when it's over, but a rule of thumb that most people use, and you'll hear people talk about this in the popular price, is that a recession is when the real GDP falls, when it declines for 2 quarters in a row, something that we had in 2001 and 2008, 2009. Now, the reason I wanted to wait until now to talk about real GDP, to go back to chapter 19, is because the calculations here, prices and quantities in different years, seem really similar to price indexes that we talked about before. But although the math is similar, there's a subtle but important difference. Real GDP says for any year, call it year X, we are going to take all of the goods and multiply each good times its price in the base year. We keep the prices constant, in other words, keep the prices as base year, but we allow the goods to vary. This shows us if prices hadn't changed, what would happen to the dollar value of what we produced. A price index asks a different question. It doesn't ask what we're producing, but rather it says what happens to the price of a group of goods. So we take the goods in a base year. We sometimes say a basket of goods, and we see how the price of that basket changes over time. We keep the goods constant to examine how prices have changed for a group of goods. Now, a couple of closing thoughts. Practice. You might want to look at the midterm 3 from 2019. You might want to first look at the one without the answers and then the one with, and do problems 1 and 3. That will be great practice before you do the sapling. Kind of give you practice on just what we have been covering. Now, we looked a few minutes ago at real GDP, and these are the numbers that you saw in the graph before. That being the case, what I've done here is I've calculated the percentage change. I have a little rule that's kind of a good rule to follow in trying to figure out, is GDP growing at a good rate or not? This is for the United States. When GDP grows at 4%, just compare GDP like a GPA. 4.4%, that's a 4.0, that's an A. So GDP in 2004 was really growing quite well. Give the economy an A. 3% growth, that's a B. 2%, that's a 2.0. So you can see that in some of the recent years, GDP growth has been the grade I would give it would be about a B or a C level. I apologize, this last one got cut off for 2019. That was about 2.3%. But if GDP is shrinking, ooh, that's like having a negative GPA. That would be really bad. And you can see that for 2009 as well as 2008, real GDP did fall. Unfortunately, if I have to make a guess for 2020, at least for the first quarter of the year and probably the second quarter of the year, when the data becomes available in a few months, I think we're going to see that there has been another recession. One way of kind of looking at that is, another thought about GDP is GD depressing. And sadly, I think we're going to see more of that. Okay, I'm going to make these slides available for you on Blackboard. Feel free to watch this again. I might post some other slides. And now there's a sampling on this material for Thursday. Take care, stay well.